Hello, everyone, and welcome to MAPS Canada. The Research Room is produced by MAPS Canada, a volunteer-run nonprofit charitable organization committed to expanding access to safe and legal psychedelics through research, education, and advocacy. The MAPS Canada Research Room is a monthly online program that highlights cutting-edge Canadian research and researchers from a range of disciplines within the growing field of psychedelic studies. And the research room also offers a platform for researchers to actively engage with the audience about their current work. So I'd first like to start by thanking Dr. Houman for joining us in today's session. This month, our theme of the month is the psychedelics art at MAPS Canada, and we are thrilled to have you present with us. So I'll just read a bit about Dr. Houman's background so everyone is familiar with who he is. He's a physician and researcher specializing in psychedelic medicine and palliative care. He serves as an attending physician in the Division of Palliative Care at the Jewish General Hospital and is a lecturer at McGill University. He's a trainer for Therapsil and was a former trial site physician for MAPUS, a multi-site open label extension study of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. He is also the founder of Mystic Health, a psychedelic venture currently operating in Southern California. Additionally, he is a DJ and music producer with various international appearances. And these are a list of the social media platforms that Dr. Houman is on. If anyone wants to follow him or join these platforms, then you're welcome to. And I'll send a link to all of these in the chat as well.
Thank you so much.
So, oh, was someone saying something?
I just thanked you for the warm introduction.
Yeah. And this talk is about music and non-music approaches in psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy. And we also did a knowledge translation on this paper. And the paper was also available on the Eventbrite, I believe. So in this talk, Dr. Houman will explore the role of music and silence in psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy. While music is commonly used to guide therapeutic experiences, its absence has been underexplored. The talk will highlight findings from his study with 2 breast cancer patients in Canada's Compassionate Access Program and other experiences conducting PAP. One patient found the silence helpful for mindfulness, while the other used it to explore challenging memories triggered by the music. These results suggest that silent periods in PAP can enhance mindfulness and therapist-patient interactions. So I guess if anyone, we can get started on the presentation.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. And thanks for everyone who's joined. It's a pleasure to be here. So the topic that we're going to discuss is music and psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy. The title of my talk is the title of the paper that's been referenced. I'll start off by giving credit to the primary authors of this paper, who are my dear colleagues. My role in this particular publication was primarily as a clinician. I facilitated getting access to the psilocybin and led the treatments, and the patients treated here are my patients that I still follow and have been following for a number of years. So a lot of credit to them. I'm going to discuss the paper, but also some of my other experiences conducting psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy, primarily for cancer patients. And so I'll do about a 30, maximum 40-minute presentation, and we can have a discussion after that. So to begin, some disclosures. As mentioned, I was part of the MAPS trials towards the end of the phase 3 clinical trial sites in Montreal. That's how I got involved in psychedelic research. It's been a long-standing passion of mine, really since undergraduate studies at UC Berkeley. I have been a trainer for Therapsil. I helped launch a lot of the training programs out in Montreal and Los Angeles, and basically was involved in the training ethics committees have much less time to do that these days. I am an investor in Beckley SciTech. I founded my own company called Mystic Health, which is a holistic medical practice operating in Los Angeles currently. And I teach at McGill University, work at the Jewish General. I have some research funding that's listed. So a quick ode to my mother, who inspires my work. This is illustrated by my wife. But I lost my mother at the age of 2.5, and that's sort of my own healing journey. And that's how I got thrown into the world of mindfulness, meditation, and ultimately psychedelics for healing, to try to offer healing experiences to my patients. Also, an ode to the Indigenous and the beautiful nature of Canada. I spent about 6 years traveling, doing locums in remote rural communities, mostly working with Indigenous populations. And these are some of the snapshots of the beautiful experiences I had in this vast wilderness. So I'm sure everyone's familiar here, but psilocybin was banned in 1974 in Canada, a year after the US banned it. And this ban continued until August 2020, after a 100-day campaign where Therasil essentially advocated for 4 patients to get access to, not exactly psilocybin, but to psilocybin mushrooms. This Section 56 exemption to the criminal code is the same entryway that cannabis took to ultimately reach full legalization recreationally. And so what happened is these 4 patients got access. Subsequently, the first training cohort for Therasil applied and got access. And after that, a lot of ups and downs since. But ultimately, psilocybin and MDMA were added to the Special Access Program, which is a compassionate use program. And now we can apply on a case-by-case basis and get access to GMP quality psilocybin and MDMA for patients that do get approved. My focus with psilocybin has primarily been with cancer patients, but also some treatment-resistant depression, and MDMA for treatment-resistant PTSD. So the first patients treated in Quebec were in May of 2022. And, speaking in an audience like this, most people I'm sure have heard of the Special Access Program, but when I typically give this talk, majority of Canadians have no idea that this program exists. And so this is the result of a survey we conducted, national survey, individuals with master's degree education and higher. And we can see that the majority of people have no idea that the Special Access Program exists. We published a paper on that. The same survey showed that 79% of the population do support the use of psilocybin in palliative care contexts for existential distress. So this is the first training cohort we designed in Montreal during the pandemic. And a number of the people in this photo are involved in the publication and also leading a lot of the work that's being done here in Quebec, including Dr. Carl Greenway, who's standing next to me on the right. He's a psychiatrist also at the Jewish General Hospital, and they're doing some amazing work, including with ketamine. And they've developed a model called the Montreal model, which emphasizes, using ketamine outside of just the biomedical model. So applying a psychedelic framework for ketamine-assisted therapy, a focus on depression, but we're also hoping to be using it in palliative care. So this paper is basically a case report, and the case report is about this particular session that you see here. And this was done at a cancer wellness center that's associated with our hospital. It took a good 2 years of negotiations with them to allow me to do this first session there. And it's a beautiful space. This is the yoga room where they have all kinds of events. But we set up the patients, so 2 patients being treated with myself, Kyle, who's a psychiatrist, and a co-therapist who's a psychotherapist. I had both patients followed by the psychotherapist for preparation and integration, and they're still both followed by myself and the psychotherapist. And so this was a first in the province, and actually it got some press coverage at that time. And so this is the paper, and I'm going to go through parts of the paper and then also just show you some material and delve deeper into the journeys that led the patients to that special day. So generally speaking, music has been a standard part of psychedelic assisted therapy, and most clinical trials even use music as a core part of the experience. In this session, we sort of go by the standards of clinical trials, but we have a little more leeway, when dealing with things like music and just giving patients a bit more autonomy during the sessions. And so these patients had multiple preparatory sessions before this treatment, and including in-person sessions where they got to meet each other, and they got to meet the new sort of therapist in the room, who was a psychiatrist. And so normally what I do is I have a discussion about music with patients. I have a very patient-centered approach, and I understand what their taste is like, if there are things that they particularly don't like. And even it's good to check on things like, let's say, religious background. For example, let's say someone has a Hindu background. A lot of the commonly used music might have elements, chants, that have a particular meaning, and that could be good or bad, but it's just good to be mindful of the music we choose for a session and how it relates to the individual. And so music being a big passion of mine, I've spent a lot of time creating playlists. And so I had the discussion and tried to choose a playlist that would work for these patients. And this was the first time we were doing group therapy. So before this, it was all individual therapy, and this was the first time we had two patients being treated in the same space. As you may know, when conducting group therapy, sometimes the patients are doing the preparation integration as a group, but they go to individual rooms when they're under the influence of the substance. In this case, we had the option of doing it in separate rooms, but they decided to do it in the same space, with the option to leave the common space if that was desired. So in this session, we specifically asked the patients if they'll be okay with cutting the music for a brief period of time, 15 to 30 minutes. When I do my playlists, a lot of times I leave certain silent tracks. It really depends on the individual, but in this particular case, it was longer, and it allowed for what came to be this publication, which is that subjective experience of the patients. This particular approach was inspired by Kyle and his partner Nico, who are two psychiatrists with lots of experience doing ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. And so in the hundreds of treatments that they did with their patients, they experimented with music, with stopping music, and they even did some studies with some publications that are referenced in this paper in terms of how music is its own entity in the room. It's like the music is a therapist, and in the absence of music, you essentially have to do a lot more work. So this sort of, being specific on how much music is played, is there an intentional silence? The specifics of the setting, the set and setting is very important in this work. And in most publications and trials, the specifics of set and setting haven't been objectified and reported. And so a big part of the work of my colleagues here, and it's part of this international effort to fine tune set and setting, and to try to objectify what elements in the setting influence the results and outcomes. And so part of it was related to that. And as far as their search concluded, there hasn't been any publication that's actually alluded to the exact sort of mechanism of stopping the music, what sort of outcome it has. And so there's some novelty to this. And again, I mean, this wasn't a study per se. This is access through the Compassion Access Program. And what we try to do is publish on this compassionate use pathway. Even though it's not an actual clinical trial, it's still very valuable for a real world example. And so in the majority of trials, we have music playing either in the form of speakers in the room or headphones. What I like to do is have both. So we usually have music playing in the room so that everyone can hear what's being played. And then at the same time, the same music is going to speakers and people have the speakers. So they have the option to be internal with the speaker or take it off, and we can adjust all of the volumes independently. So the headphones for each patient and the music in the main room are all adjustable. And so generally speaking, music has a very important role in therapy. It provides reassurance and structure, and it takes people on a journey, and this journey can be very healing, as I'm sure you can imagine. So again, alluding to the fact that there hasn't been much research into these silent periods, and the fact that some form of relevant silence is practiced in indigenous rituals. And, silence is a strong word because true silence usually doesn't exist. There's always ambient sounds, not always, but most of the time. And so when there is no music, usually you do hear sounds from other sources. In this particular instance, it was a pretty quiet ambience, and we had the whole building to ourselves when we do these sessions. So it was relative silence. The other important piece is mindfulness. So we use mindfulness a lot in preparation during our sessions, especially in the beginning, if there's any challenging emotions that come up, and also in integration. So the mindfulness and psychedelic experience are very much aligned and parallel, and we try to use mindfulness a lot. And usually these meditative practices are conducted in silence. So doing mindfulness at the same time, especially guided mindfulness at the same time as music, might be a bit confusing for patients. So I'm going to talk about the first patient. So I've been following this patient for many years. She's been open about her journey. I'll explain some of her reactions that day, and we'll delve a bit into her story. So this patient was actually the first patient that was treated in Quebec under the Section 56 exemption. She's a woman in her 60s that has advanced stage breast cancer. And prior to this session, so this session that we were reporting was her fourth time being treated. She had 2 treatments with the Section 56 exemption, where the patient obtains the magic mushrooms from an unknown source. And then when the Special Access Program was launched, she got 25 milligrams of psilocybin from a company that has an approved product, essentially. And so the evolution of her journey has been very interesting, and we'll delve into that in a little bit. But this session was different because, first of all, we had a new clinician in the room, and then the patient, this was the first time she was doing group therapy. So 2 huge new elements. And I guess the third part was that we were doing it in this Hope and Cope Center for the first time. Her first treatments were done in her home as a home care type model. And it's special for me because every time she had a new treatment, I would make a new playlist for her. She was my first patient. And so every time I would choose a new playlist with new music. And so this was the 4th playlist I was making. And generally speaking, the playlist resonated with her, and she had some profound experiences. And so this time also, she had a really nice experience with the music, very engaged, until really she was asked to sort of observe the silence. In her own words, music is extremely important, and especially during integration, I listen to the playlist all the time to remember the emotional states I was in while I listened to it. And so this is common practice to use the music from the sessions to revisit and integrate. Now, when we stopped the music, it was actually Carl with her and doing some mindfulness exercises, and she was having some stomach upset, and we had some blueberries, I remember. So she started having some mindfulness activities while eating blueberries. And that was a very powerful experience for her because heightened sensations and the fruits flavor was really extraordinary, as she put it. So when we stopped the music, I felt strange because I'm not used to it. I had sessions with music wall to wall, but very quickly I got used to it and I could appreciate the silence. So overall, the mindfulness oriented approach was positive for her. And later in the session, we also had periods without music. Now, just throwing it back a bit, this actually was the first time we treated her in May of 2022 in her home. And that first experience was a challenging experience for her. And particularly, there was a song in the playlist, and I realized when I'm choosing it that it was a challenging song. And I remember that when the song came up, it started provoking some difficult emotions for her. But through mindfulness practices, she was able to sit with those emotions, and ultimately, she had the option to skip the song, but usually we encourage to see if someone can sit with the difficult feelings. It's part of doing the work. And so this drawing that I love to show is basically what she drew about her own experience. And so when you look at this drawing, what you see is that there is a dark cloud that surrounds her face. And so this dark cloud is the reality that she's normally stuck in. These difficult emotions, and that first experience, though challenging, gave her an opportunity to tap into something else. And so if we look at where her heart is tapping into this tapestry of color that sits behind this dark veil. And so through this work, she's managed to, lift the veil further, and with every experience, really push forward the work in psychotherapy and in personal spiritual healing. So initially, she was very closed about the sessions, but later opened up, and we actually made a documentary. We didn't make a documentary, but Radio Canada, which is the French wing of CBC, made a documentary, and it's a really interesting piece for anyone that's interested. This is just her feedback about the treatments. This treatment has enabled me to reinvest in my life, to give back its full meaning. I'm again involved in my community. I have projects. I'm in contact with friends and loved ones. The idea of death, the idea of a limit to my life is no longer paralyzing, and it doesn't prevent me from enjoying the present moment. If anyone's interested in watching this documentary, it's called Renaissance Psychedelic, and it's in French, but if you watch it on YouTube, there is automated subtitle system that will translate for you if it's done on your laptop. So not on a cell phone, but YouTube on a desktop computer will do translation. It's a very well-made documentary. I'm gonna try to play some clips from the documentary here so you get a feel. And I just want to double check that the sound will work. Okay, I'm sharing my sound here. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it. It's coming.
Can everyone hear? So these clips are from the third session we had. And so the third session we had together was filmed for the documentary. And you can see how music is such a strong part of it. And it's just really interesting how music becomes a soundtrack to what unveils, and it just becomes very powerful when done well.
Yeah, I feel it. It's coming in my.
It's the same clip.
Lost paradise. The sadness, the suffering. The sadness when I see the state of the world, and I, yeah, sometimes it scares me. That's really sad.
But when you talk about compassion, you sort of bring in this drive to create change.
Yes.
And that is what takes that pain and then actually sort of channels it into something productive.
That's what I would like to do. Definitely. I I don't know how to do it yet.
And so, I mean, you see that there is a lot of dialogue, and we've chosen the sections that are more active in that sense. But in a lot of situations, the patient is left alone and they have this internal journey and people aren't really talking. But when you have a comfortable environment, there is a back and forth. So music isn't necessarily exclusive of mindfulness, of talk therapy. But in a lot of trials it is. And I think part of the idea with this paper is to just try to objectify that and point out, the results of two trials that are using this in completely different ways is going to vary, and it's important to know that. Okay, so I'll move on to second patient. So this patient is a woman in her 50s, and she had bilateral breast cancer, luckily in remission at the time, but she had been wanting to do therapy, and it took a while to do her paperwork. And so in this period, I linked her up with the psychotherapist I work with, and she arranged 2 ayahuasca trips, and not back to back, but first she visited Peru. She did it the indigenous way, and then later in the Santo Daime Church in Montreal, which is a legal ayahuasca church, a branch of the Brazilian Santo Daime. She had an experience there, and so this was the first time she was experiencing psilocybin. And so this patient had never had an individual experience. This group therapy was her first time with psilocybin. And it was it was a very different experience for her than patient one. And specifically with relation to music, the music became very intense for her. And so the setup that we had was great, because at one point the music essentially transported her back to this intense experience she had had in a club in the 80s or 90s, and it brought up all these challenging emotions. And so in her own words, I was transported to a nightclub in the 90s, and I remember that night specifically, and the music got really loud because it was loud that night, and I just wanted to get out. I felt like it was too much. I was suffocating. It was dark, too many people. And so this sort of flashback, in a sense, to this previously unpleasant experience emerged. And the beauty of the setup was we immediately cut the music to the room after she requested that. And so patient one still had her headphones on, and she was having this amazing journey. You could tell even from the other side of the room, whereas patient two wanted absolute silence. And so the music was too overwhelming for her. And sometimes when you're dealing with very deep emotions, you can become overstimulated. And so she became overstimulated. And luckily we were able to navigate that and engage in really deep talk therapy. And so sometimes this resistance to music is thought to be perhaps a negative thing, but really from the patient-centered approach, it's whatever is needed at that moment. And at that moment, she was feeling very vulnerable, and she was speaking very softly. Like if there was any music in the room, we couldn't hear what she was saying. And so that calmness allowed this intricate communication that took place for a long time without music. And we were able to practice some somatic techniques. And then eventually she wanted to leave the main area. So we actually left the main room, went to another room, and that's where she started talking about some older traumas. And you know, the reality is she had never had that individual experience. The ayahuasca sessions and this, they were all done in groups. And so having that space allowed her to have a bit of an individual therapy type experience. So she said, I always had the option to put the headphones back on. And at one point I was asked if I wanted to, but I said no. I've been too lonely with my thoughts, and in the darkness, I just want to have my eyes open. I needed reassurance. It's almost like I couldn't rest. I want desperately to rest, but it's almost like if I rest, something's going to go wrong. Someone's going to leave. So it was very informing of how I'm always trying to make sure I can't rest because I need to make sure everything's okay. And if I don't, then they will leave and they won't love me anymore. And that's something I will explore in my therapy. We haven't gone there yet. And I can say that, you know, the therapy's continued. We had another group session with this patient and 2 other cancer patients that went really well. And so she's done a lot of amazing work since then. This is her in the room with the therapist. And as you see, we take notes when important things are said. There's an altar with personal, valuable, personal items that have meaning. And so there's some poetry there, and I'm going to read one of her poems. Dear home, I search for you like a soul seeks redemption. You linger on the outskirts of my understanding. Welcome me to your front yard where I stand paralyzed, knowing that a step further and you'd become an illusion. Stay if you must, but leave a light on as I ride on this path to you. One before me left this trail. One besides me lifted the veil. One behind me is a raging sea, is adjusting her sail to you, dear home. Leave a light on for us. And so poetry, she calls for true love, and she uses that as a tool for integration to express herself. And the breakthrough here was that she realized that this poem that she wrote here, this poem that I just read, she had written it years ago. And in that state, she realized that the poem was essentially a message from her trapped inner child to her adult self to rekindle their relationship. And that's a lot of the work we do is this inner child work. And so it was really beautiful to have that experience in the silence that it required to allow her to reach at that depth and that understanding. I'll just play a quick video of the room that day. And so one of the things with the music is that we typically choose songs that have lyrics in language that the patient doesn't understand. So I just want to play 1 or 2 more clips so you see. This is another patient we treated, another patient that's been really open about his experience. And I'll play a clip on a difficult part of his journey as the medicine was about to take over. And he was having a hard time letting go. And there are some subtitles because it's hard to understand.
Oh, shit. That's okay. Fuck it.
That's okay. Get angry.
Fuck it.
It's okay.
You know, I hate being this person. I hate it. You know?
Yeah.
I fucking hate it, man. I fucking hate it.
I think, you know, these parts served a function at some point when you were vulnerable.
Yeah.
And we have to respect the parts and ask them to maybe take a step back because we're made of different parts. It's just one part. You're much wiser than I ever understood. Really. I don't know you very well, but, you know, I'm just really appreciative of that.
So here we see, first of all, we encourage flowers. It's just nice to have flowers in that state, and it's a gift of the patient to themselves. But the music, you know, the melancholy sort of facilitates breakthroughs, and it requires input. And then using the IFS framework, we were able to help him let go. And what followed was hours of crying deeper than he's ever cried in his life. And he actually had made his own playlist for after the session. He said, I have a playlist of my favorite songs. And so when he was done, it was like a perfect timing that the playlist I had made ended. And I'll show you a clip of what happened after.
Every day I look at the world from my window.
And so that was his own playlist. And again, like working with patients to incorporate, you know, their own sort of elements into the therapy framework is really nice. So that's him after. Just like a note for those that don't know, this is again from our survey that showed majority of Canadians support the public system covering either part or all of the cost of therapy. And in Quebec, we were the first place that managed to do that. So family doctors billing for psilocybin-assisted therapy were getting it covered, including for the group therapy. Unfortunately, after the MAPS FDA situation, they stopped covering MDMA. I'm just going to end by another example here. This was a patient, end-of-life patient, who ultimately chose medical aid in dying not long after his psilocybin session, but he was the first patient in Quebec through the Special Access Program. And in this case, he liked music and everything, but he didn't want music playing for really the majority of the 6-hour session. He really wanted both my co-therapist and I in the room. He wanted both of us deeply engaged, and he just wanted to talk. And he was having this powerful mystical experience. And this was by his country home. And there was a breeze. We could, you know, hear the wind and the trees, and it was beautiful, and with zero music. And he didn't need music. Music was distracting for him. And we did that, and it went really well. That's him with his cat there, and he didn't want the eye shades, and it was a really beautiful experience. That was sort of the earlier psilocybin vials that were being shipped. And I wrote an article on it, which, if anyone's interested, it's free online, Healing at Death's Door. And that's a narrative piece on our experience with that patient. And the last one I'll talk about is this patient also, a lady in her 70s with advanced cancer. And this lady had a very complex relationship to music. And so she had had some heartbreaks in her life, and she loved music, but because music was nostalgic to happier times in her life, she could not bear listening to music. Like, she had cut out music from her life because it was too hard for her to listen to music, even though she loved it. And so it was a challenge during her experience to you know, play different songs, and you know, she wanted the music, but it was hard for her. But ultimately, it was very powerful for her. It was a healing experience, especially when she went back and revisited the videos, which included the music. She almost had a second psychedelic experience, and she was sort of fine after that. She improved significantly, and she was supposed to have a prognosis of a few months, and it's already been a few years. I actually have a follow-up with her to see how she's doing. But you know, everyone's different with music, and we keep it personalized. Yeah, I'll skip this so we can have some discussion. You know, we can open it up and then see if anyone has any questions or comments.
And you can put your questions on the chat or raise your hand and speak.
Thanks. Yeah, great question. So the playlists are available. So I've made, there are 5 psilocybin playlists. And what's cool is that the 5th psilocybin playlist was actually patient 1 in this study. She took a selection of her favorite tracks from the first 4 playlists, and a few other track suggestions, and I created the 5th playlist based on that. And then there's one MDMA playlist that I've published. There's a second one that will release, and this is all on my SoundCloud. So I'm gonna put this in the chat for you in a few minutes. And I'll say that these playlists, they don't have the intentional silent tracks in there. It is a really good way to check in with people. A lot of times what we do is, let's say, physical touch is a tricky subject. And sometimes some people don't want physical touch, or for whatever reason, turning down the music or having a silent track is a great way to check in with people, to see where they're at. If they've been very much internal and you don't want to be disruptive, that's just a great way. You can add silent tracks to the playlist.
I think Leah had a question.
Yes, I did. Thank you, doctor, for your presentation today. I speak as an amputee in Props, Ontario. I have been able to access, before the pandemic, some ketamine lidocaine infusion to help with both my pain and my anxiety/depression. What I found through your presentation that was unique, since I haven't had ayahuasca, it's been mainly psilocybin and that clinical treatment by IV with ketamine lidocaine. What I found between the two, and I don't know if the book or the article that you mentioned or some of your other playlists cover this, but I noticed a distinct, whether it's integrating memories or just how you said, your patient not wanting music. It's almost like there's a internal voice saying, I don't want this, I don't like that. And you're through the journey, you're trying to find ways to be in comfort. Have you, and my question is this, since I've tried to utilize different types of music, different types of playlists, ranging from, Tibetan singing bowls to more ethereal music, and then going right into some more culture, indigenous culture and Afro-Caribbean culture. And sometimes it's just drums. Do you find that there is an element, because I've been drawn to this in the last 2 months, to want to be outside or to have something that is more of a nature, babbling brook, birds, that type of nature connection with the music that you use?
Thank you for your question and for sharing your story. I personally am a big fan of incorporating nature into the experience. So the playlists that I've shared, they all do have sounds of nature. And this, this advice came from Brian Richards, Bill Richards' son, in terms of having bird song as something that's shown to clinically relax people. So I start all my playlists even with the bird song, and I loop it while we're getting ready before sort of going into the experience. So I think having nature is very important. And luckily in this center where we do our sessions, we do have access to a backyard, and when the weather permits, we actually transition outside into nature with the trees and birds and flowers. And so, yes, I mean, to answer your question, I think nature should be a part of this, and nature relatedness, I think, is one of the reasons these treatments are effective. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. The only other side to that, just out of curiosity, since I know SAP program is something that's been discussed not only with MAPS. I've been following MAPS work for quite some time. But where do you see do you see funding as a situation that will move from Quebec or move to BC, or where do you think from a provincial standpoint, or maybe even just in general, for people that can't necessarily afford but absolutely could benefit from these type of treatments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was a pleasant surprise to have this approved in Quebec. I think the short answer is that it's a matter of time before we do have some form of approval, but it's not as quick as we were hoping. Once a treatment is officially approved by the FDA and Health Canada, then provincial systems and private insurers will move to cover that. And so, for example, from my understanding in Alberta, even though it took a while, ketamine-assisted therapy is now also being covered by Blue Cross. And so, the more legitimized the treatment becomes, the more research evidence gathers to support it, the higher the chance of it being approved. And so I do think it's a matter of time, and hopefully through research as well. I think pain is an under-researched area, and it is coming. And there's a lot of evidence. And as an example, the patient that we treated in that natural setting, he had extreme pain. And part of our work that day involved changing his relationship with the pain. So being with the pain rather than resisting it. It's often the resistance to the pain that amplifies the suffering. And so working with it in that sense could make it more effective. But I think, yeah, through research, ultimately, hopefully there'll be more access. And ultimately, once the studies are published and we get more official approval, there'll be more expanded access that way.
Great, thank you.
Riel is having some technical issues, but she also had a question.
Thank you. Thank you for calling on me. Thank you so much, Houman. That was a really, really interesting presentation. And something that really, came to mind was the thing about, somebody who was saying that it was overstimulating for them, and it was also taking them somewhere when they weren't ready to go there, and it really does do that. Music takes you on a journey, but you might be wanting to stay, or go in a different direction. So it's a tricky one to find. So I appreciate the kind of the protocol you have, where there was some autonomy in being able to take them off and, have that silence. I was, wondering about a couple things. One is about, is there a way to, I know you do a lot of preparatory work with people, but is there a way to assess ahead of time the kind of sensitivity that people will have to music?
Thank you. Thanks for your comments, and a very good question. One of the things we're trying to do at Mystic Health is actually try to objectify and standardize the approach, try to do a better assessment of what elements, will determine the specific characteristics of an individual and how they'll respond. And so as far as I know, I mean, there's a lot of effort being done. I think even with sort of wave paths and Mendel Kaelin and such. The way it's done now is really just a personalized interview and seeing what they like, what they don't like, what the previous experiences have been. belief, language, these kinds of things, and going based on that. And it's not a very efficient way to do it because, these playlists took so many hours to make. But, I think with AI and with technology, we're definitely going to have more efficient ways to do that. AI is doing all kinds of amazing things these days. And so I think it's a matter of time before, let's say, AI can go to your playlists, like to your listening history, and just tell you exactly, these kinds of things. And I'm not familiar with any tool that I could recommend, but I know that there are things in the making, and we're also trying to do something like that. And right now, it's just a plain old interview. But thanks, friends.
And just like a quick follow-up with that, because I know like the kind of standard kind of clinical trial thing was with music, like with Johns Hopkins. And I wonder if that's kind of just something that people are carrying along because that's how it started. Um, eh,
I mean, I think if you go to the roots, which are indigenous, music has been part of the indigenous sort of use, and the shaman's drum. And, I think the music is definitely core, and, sound and vibration. I know Alan is talking about that as well. I think the vibration and sound, all of it together, is a core part of the experience. But, I think every session is different. As every session, even if it's the same individual with the same medicine, it's going to be different. And so I think having tools in the toolbox is the way to go, being prepared to deal with silence. And I think that's one of the issues. If someone's going in saying, okay, we're going to listen to this playlist and that's how it's done, and then all of a sudden the patient doesn't want to listen and they want to have a deep conversation and you don't feel ready, I think it's a matter of being vigilant and being able to adapt to an unknown situation, because that's ultimately what we're doing. This is like experimental therapy with a lot of unknowns. And so that's my approach, is to be prepared to change the music, change the genre, go into silence, have a drum, like I sort of go in prepared. And I think that's how it should be until we have more data to be able to guide us more objectively.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't know if Arseny had his hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. That was for sharing all the experiences. I just wanted to say that I'm really happy to see someone from Montreal, the community. I know some people here already doing the research, like Coco Lab and some clinics, but it's kind of dispersed. So I'm really happy to see more people, and hopefully at some point we're gonna have like an actual community that people are gonna come and share their research or their clinical experiences. I was thinking about the last question with the AI, that would be interesting, like the Brahms. I know there is the whole music, like I'm pretty involved like at UDM, so the idea of having research that they would be collaborating, some collaborations going on. Anyway, so just saying that that's I'm really happy about this. I just had a more question, more like a personal question, because I'm a psychologist by training. So I was wondering, you were saying about the inner child, and I wanted to see if you're using a specific approach, and you see more like as a psychodynamic approach, or you're like you have a more specific idea how you're guiding the person through the experience. So just wanted to touch on that.
Thanks. Yeah, first of all, it's great that you're in Montreal. I'm happy to connect. And yeah, we do have a circle that's growing and a lot of interesting research taking place. The inner child, we use a non-directive approach. So, we don't usually go and say, okay, so what's your inner child saying, unless it's something that's been worked on, let's say in therapy, or if it comes up organically, and it actually does come up organically. So many stories, like profound stories of emotions coming up. And if we can use somatic approaches to sort of go to where the emotion is felt in the body, and then it's literally, this body keeps the score, it goes into some memory. And often these memories are childhood memories, and they're stored there. They're manifesting in ways causing suffering below the level of conscious awareness. But if you're able to create the environment for the patient to actually allow it to unfold, it goes automatically into the childhood memory. And, we don't have time, but like, for example, this MDMA treatment that we did, the patient thought their trauma is related to an adult event, but the trauma is really related to childhood. How you respond to the adult trauma is related to how you responded as a child. And so again, we don't direct them unless it's clear, or if it's something that's been agreed upon or discussed in therapy in advance. But really, if you set the right sort of environments, it automatically unfolds and goes to these childhood memories.
Thank you so much. I would be happy to connect.
Yeah, please reach out, LinkedIn.
You answered it briefly, but Alan also posted a question in the chat asking about if your research has or will explore the more metaphysical aspects of silence, such as frequencies and vibrations, and the role that these play in mental states and the ability to contemplate and integrate during medicine work.
Yeah, it's a great question by Alan. And, Alan and I are working on a case report, which we have to circle back on, actually. It hasn't gotten there, but it's where it should go. So, Alan, I think we need to collaborate on this one. But that is again part of the Mystic Health vision, is to try to tap into some of the more spiritual, metaphysical elements of our experience. And so we're setting up some research now actively with some really amazing researchers. And so hopefully I can answer that more, and Alan, we should collaborate on that. Thank you.
It is almost time for us to end the presentation. Does anyone have any last comments, remarks, questions, or anything else they'd like to add?
You just mentioned blueberries earlier with stomach discomfort. Was that a preference of the individual, or is that what you use to help the discomfort when it happens with psilocybin?
Thanks for the great question. I mean, usually we ask patients to bring in snacks, and the snacks are typically light fruits and nuts, maybe yogurt if they're not lactose intolerant. So the patient already had brought some blueberries, and so we sort of brought her stash. But yeah, typically speaking, it happens often that someone has a little bit of reflux or some sort of stomach discomfort after the psilocybin, and having a little bit of a light snack like fruits, especially during the session. And plus, if we can pair it with the mindfulness approach, mindful eating has been really positive. But yeah, she had brought the blueberries, but I think they're great tool.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I think I speak for everyone when I say that I learned a lot, and this is a very interesting topic.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the wonderful questions and discussion. And it's a pleasure to.
I will just share the final slide. Can everyone see this? Well, thank you, Dr. Houman, everyone, for coming today. Our next session is on June 19th with Dr. Lauren Eth, and that will be on the topic of drug testing and safety during festivals. Join our mailing list to get updates when registration is open and about all our other initiatives. I did drop some links in the chat for you to access our website or join our mailing list. You can visit our webpage for the recording for today's session and past sessions. We are waiting for confirmation on the recording for today's session, just because of confidentiality of all the patients that were seen in the session. But if we have the ability to, we will try our best to post this. And if you or anyone you know want to present, or if you want to see someone else present, then feel free to email us at researchroom@mapscanada.org, and we will try our best to accommodate that. We really appreciate everyone's attendance by donation for today's event. So please consider making a further donation to MAPS Canada's general fund to support all our initiatives to expand safe, legal, and equitable access to psychedelics. We really appreciate your support.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.